discussing the painting that shocked the world, a book by Miles Unger. It's a book. This book has two facets to it. On the one hand, it's the biography of Picasso in a very specific period of time, which is between 1900 and 1910. So it's a very deep psychological and cultural testament of that particular time frame. But then it also has a much deeper um, effect on the reader because it gives you the base for what happens when society changes direction. What I mean with that is Unger weaves art history, culture, social movements, and science into one big mesh that evolves. And he's showing this not just with the art movement and the Picasso and the Banda Picasso and all the things that happened in Montmartre in those years, but he also embeds it actually in the creation of a piece of art, and that's the painting that shocked the world. And we're talking about Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which is a painting that Picasso painted around 1906, I believe. So it's the process of painting that oeuvre. He's showing in the evolution of that painting how the artist thinks through, struggles through the process of creation, and this is very akin to what, let's say, David Deutsch talks about, right? The beauty and art is as subjective and follows a certain objectivity as is science. So this ambivalence between your own contribution and your own I or me that comes through, 0 to 1 even, Peter Thiel. There is this evolution that comes from you, but then it's embedded in some sort of objectivity, whether that is embedded in real science, let's say, physics, or in art, or in something in between. That's not even that important. I think what matters fundamentally here for the reader is the revelation that we have an art movement that starts at the turn of the 20th century, which does not coincide with the scientific movement, but it's driven by it, or it even influences it. There's a reciprocity between what's happening in Göttingen and Zurich, in particular Heisenberg and Einstein, and what's happening in Paris. And I guarantee you the word Heisenberg and Einstein never comes up in this book, nor does the word Picasso come up in any biography of Einstein or Heisenberg. At least it doesn't come up prominently. But they are almost the same thing. And I want to discuss this. I think this is the real contribution of this book. So highly recommend the book. This is not a book that you want to read, I don't know, because you love art or things like that. That's not what this book is about. Really not. It's actually not at all. This book, in my opinion, is about the evolution of human consciousness. There is a line in the book where Unger talks about the revolution of consciousness. This is what happened, and he's able to depict that within the context of a painting, which is amazing. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's April 3rd, 2024. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 1%. The market's up 0.5%. For the year, we're down 19.7%. The market is up 10.5%. We're underperforming by 30.2%. The Painting That Shocked the World by Miles Unger, it's a book about the biography of Picasso in a very particular time frame. It's when he moves to he moves to Paris from Barcelona and establishes himself as an artist. It's also about a particular painting that he paints in that time period. It's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. That's the painting. It's the beginning of Cubism. There is quite a good section about the evolution of Cubism. And I think the most important contribution of the book is the interwoven story of the cultural and scientific revolution that happens at that time. In other words, Unger is really, really, he does a really good job in describing a zeitgeist that is embedded in the scientific and cultural revolution of that time. In other words, in the culture, it's literally a revolution of consciousness. What I'm talking about here is we have Einstein and Heisenberg. They both discover new laws of physics that govern the way nature works. On the one hand, we have relativity and space-time, and on the other hand, we have quantum physics. Both have a profound impact on the social consciousness, on the consciousness socially, scientifically, artistically. There is also the conjecture, which later on culminates in Gödel's inconsistency theorem, which in a nutshell says that a system from within cannot be defined. And that has a profound impact on humanity. Still has. And Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is the painting by which this zeitgeist embodies itself on a canvas. The same way the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg manifests itself in scientific form on paper, and general relativity another scientific form. And there's other forms that this depicts itself. Maybe also World War I and II and fascism and communism. Because if you can't define a system from within, if there is no absolute truth that you can actually aspire to from within, at least, well, then anything goes, right? So this is also, postmodern philosophy, and even today you can argue some relativistic argumentation in the political sphere is going that way. I don't want to go this far. I want to stay with the book. Turn of the century, Picasso moves to Paris, and he starts evolving what we today call modernity. So within the art world, this means fundamentally that you think what you see. You develop a theory, and then you paint. Now, Picasso himself was against theory, but he was an early version of an abstract painter because he took away the century-old perspective of the Renaissance, that you have perspective, that you are painting what you see or feel, or even what the Impressionists did, which is what your impression is. He took that to the next level. There's a line in the book where Picasso says, I don't want to manipulate the eyes, I want to manipulate the brain. So this is the beginning of seeing art through your brain, which culminates in what became modern art. Greenberg's critique, The Painted Word by Tom Wolfe, is a big important piece that kind of summarizes all of this in the 1970s. So this is 70 years after Picasso. Tom Wolfe writes a really nice essay about this movement, and The Painted Word is in my opinion, a really, really good depiction of that scene. So, but in terms of Picasso and the Demoiselles d'Avignon, it's what you bring on the canvas is a function of how you perceive it. And it's in the eye of the beholder. There's no right or wrong way to see a Picasso painting, and certainly not a Cubist painting. I think cubism is a very unfortunate name, and it doesn't matter. But in Unger's book, the essence of the ideas comes through. You are the viewer of the piece. The piece itself has a quantum quality to it, which is it has a high probability to express something, but it's not there. It's in many places at the same time. In Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, you can see that woman on the right side, in the front side of the painting, or that appears to sit more forward. Is she sitting there? Is she spreading her legs? Is she enticing you to have sex, or is she threatening you? There is a quantum state there. So this is the zeitgeist. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle puts a quantized limit to time, which is this period in between we can't measure certain things. It looks at the world in a commutative versus non-commutative way. These are unbelievably fundamentally new concepts that even today are not understood very well, but they're there, and the scientific community certainly understood it, even the artistic community. And it's fascinating to me how society works, how scientific progress and cultural zeitgeist works through. And if I may indulge just one little tidbit tangent, I feel that is not always the case, because you have scientific developments, let's say in the Soviet Union, you have them now in China. China is a very prolific scientific place, but I don't think that there's any zeitgeist there. In fact, the zeitgeist is being imported to Silicon Valley. So it's an interesting relationship between science, zeitgeist, and freedom. That's my point. And Paris, in the turn of the century, was a free place, with amongst other places such as Berlin, probably. But it was competing with those places, and it had this market-driven quality to it, which you don't have in China today. So I just want to use this as a tangent. So science alone and breakthroughs in science don't necessarily transpire into zeitgeist. I think Unger doesn't really talk about this. It's just my tangent here, my personal view on how we get to new big developments and how people change through science and art, and how that interweaves and meshes. You need to have a sort of an overlay, and that's the overlay is non-coercive governments, and otherwise it doesn't work. So back to the book. I think very, very important to me personally today, because I think we're actually on the back of another massive scientific revolution. It's I've spoken about this in the past. We're entering an era of AI driven progress, and what that means is, in particular, I call it the era of hyper conjecture, because what we have is now we're building machines that can try and error into virtual space at a speed and scale that humans cannot, and discover new things. And physics, art, and other things, but in particular, the sciences and the arts, will be defined by the weights of the model and the data, and all the things that the pipeline, whether it's machine learning or AI, whatever you want to call this, this pipeline that starts with some sort of model and a certain architecture, and then goes out either in the wild or gets fed in virtual space and learns. We're still at the beginning of this. We have a sense, I think, where this is going. We have variational inference, in other words, statistical segmentation of the world, and then we have something akin to reinforcement learning, which is optimizing the trajectories through that hyperspace of statistical structure. And in those two developments, I think we will find new ways to understand physics, new ways to understand the arts and sciences and society and pretty much anything else. So that's the paradigm shift that we are in today. It's going to have massive implications because it's the end of knowledge as we know it, the end of theory as we know it. So it's very similar to that time in back then during Picasso's time, because back then what we gave up as a race, not as a race, as a species, is the belief that we can know things, that there's something that we can actually aspire to and hold on to in absolute terms. That's what we gave up. But we got a silver lining with Einstein, which is the concept of space-time also gives you a little bit of hope, maybe, that it's not all random, because you're just in this hyperspace of four-dimensional parameters, and you could be here or there. For some people, that's an opportunity. For some people, that's scary. But it's certainly not. It's not totally random. We can fast forward a bit with Everett and Deutsch and throw in their Popper, and we can then find ways to reconcile all that. And I think that's where we're going with this area of hyperconjecture and today's area. The multiverse interpretation of quantum physics says that anything that is possible in the laws of physics will happen in a plethora of multiverses, whether they're infinite or not. That's not the point here. But anything that can happen will happen. And then there's a certain maybe cluster of things that happen that are more likely than others. And that's what we call knowledge. And if we had a view from the outside, maybe throughout the whole multiverse, we would see that certain things replicate themselves more than others. And those are the sort of things that we consider as, well, that's a good thing, right? That's what we mean when we say it's a good thing. So fascism was not a good thing. Free markets are a good thing, and we should nurture them and continue with them, because they surface better solutions to problems. They surface more efficient solutions, things along those lines. So back to the book. I think I want to mention Deutsch and Popper here because they're important for this new paradigm. Because in this new paradigm, hyperconjecture, lots of try and error, find better ways to solve problems. We can scale that up and speed that up. So Popper's attitude towards progress or any kind of development has always been, there's no authority, there is only a better solution replaces the one before without violence, whether it's political or scientific, whether the violence is with guns or in the scientific community, the violence can happen with, well, you're not going to get tenure if you dare writing this paper, that kind of thing. So we wanna find ways to evolve the knowledge in a more liberal, more free way, so better ideas can surface. And that is going to be, I think, a big theme of this new zeitgeist, the fight for freedom. We can see it already because it's going to have a lot of implications for authority, for people that traditionally don't like these types of things, change and evolution of new things, replacing old things with new things. Like, those are scary concepts that we're going to have to struggle with, the same way the contemporaries of Picasso had to struggle with this concept of there is no authority, really. There is no fundamental way to see things, that the way you see a painting is in the eye of the beholder. And the Demoiselles d'Avignon, it's an interesting painting because it was rejected, it was considered not art, and all of that. It went through the motions of ridicule and all the things that follow a typical situation when an artist dares to go very far. So to summarize, I could talk about this book. It's a really eye-opening, inspiring book, highly recommended. I think Unger does a really fantastic job. If there is a, a value of an art critic, if there is a value in reading about art, which probably on its own is a questionable endeavor, but if there is any value, it's this is what it's supposed to look like. So I think for anybody who's interested in writing about art or even sports or business, any kind of journalistic endeavor, this is a very good lesson in journalism. Let's leave it at that. And the reason it's a very good lesson is because it does the three big things. It tells you what happened, it gives you perspective, and it also questions where you are today and where this could lead, or how you could use this as an inspiration for understanding what's happening today. Uh, Again, as a summary, I think the book is capturing a zeitgeist, a revolution in consciousness, which is driven by science, but manifests itself in the art world of Paris at the turn of the century, and in particular in a painting called the Demoiselles d'Avignon, which is the beginning of Cubism, and that is the beginning of an, a social consciousness that accepts that things are the way the the things are in the eye of the beholder. That interpretation, impression, aesthetics are in the eye of the beholder. There is an objective underlying truth to it. There is one. That's what I mean when I say this intermesh of science and culture. There is something objective there, but within that, there's this contradiction that whatever you see in the end is also in the eye of the beholder. So there's this really quantum dance between a state of objectiveness and a state of subjectivity.